The smell of glazed holiday ham and hot fruit punch filled the house when my 5 children walked in without knocking, bringing with them the cold of the night and a betrayal wrapped in gift paper. I am Anna. I am 74 years old, and I have managed this estate with an iron fist since I was widowed. They think my silence is senility, but they ignore that the fox loses its fur, but not its tricks. I always imagined that loneliness would have the sound of the wind beating against the large windows of the main living room, or perhaps the creaking of old wood on stormy nights. I never thought that loneliness would sound like the engine of 3 luxury SUVs parking on the gravel of my driveway right on Christmas Eve. I was in the kitchen, putting the final glaze on the ham, using that prune and ancho chili recipe my mother taught me half a century ago. My hands, though spotted by age and the field sun, didn't shake as I held the ladle. I felt strong, useful, ready to welcome the cavalry of grandkids and daughters-in-law who were supposedly coming to celebrate the birth of the baby Jesus. But when I stepped into the foyer, drying my hands on my embroidered apron, I didn't see any kids running around. I didn't hear any Christmas carols. It was just them, my 5 children. Robert, the eldest in his flawless suit, that's always just a little too tight around the collar, Lucy, staring at the ceiling with that calculating look she gets when she walks into an expensive boutique. Stephen, nervously jingling his car keys. And the twins, Claire and Marcella, whispering to each other without daring to meet my eyes. They didn't bring presents. They brought suitcases, and they weren't theirs. "Mom," Robert said, putting on that fake deep voice he uses when he's trying to sell a bad idea to a client. "We need to talk, please. Sit down." I stayed standing. In my own house, I decide when to sit. "Dinner is almost ready," I said, ignoring the cheap luggage they had dumped by the solid oak door. "Where are the kids?" "The kids are with their other grandparents, or at home." Lucy cut in, running a finger over non-existent dust on a mahogany console. "Tonight is for sorting out adult matters, Mom. It's for your own good." The phrase "for your own good" has always been the prelude to the worst atrocities in the history of this family. I felt a cold chill creep up from my ankles to the back of my neck. A chill that had nothing to do with the December weather. Robert pulled a glossy brochure from his jacket. It had pictures of smiling seniors playing dominoes in a generic garden. "We've made a decision. Together as the united siblings we are," he continued, taking a step closer but maintaining a safe distance, like I was some unpredictable animal. "This estate is too big for you, Anna. It's dangerous. You're all alone out here in the hills, far from hospitals, far from us." "I'm not alone," I fired back, my voice sounding much calmer than I actually felt. "I have the foreman, the people from town who work the land. They're employees." "Mom," Stephen exploded, with the impatience of someone who's in a rush to leave. "They're not family. Look, we already paid the first month. It's an assisted living facility. Eternal rest. I mean serene rest. It's the best place in the state. They have 24-hour nurses. Activities. People your age." "Old people," Marcella corrected in a whisper that I pretended not to hear. "We brought your bags," Claire said, pointing to the luggage. We packed some of your clothes the last time we came up, when you said you were feeling tired. Remember? Of course I remembered. They had come up 2 weeks ago, supposedly to visit me, but they spent the whole time roaming the hallways, opening closets, and eyeing my jewelry. I thought they were looking for keepsakes. Now I understood they were taking inventory. And what about dinner? I asked, feeling an almost scientific curiosity to see just how far their nerve went. We'll eat it here tomorrow while we organize the house, Robert said, his eyes involuntarily drifting up to the oil painting of my late husband above the fireplace, and then over to the glass cabinets holding the family silver. You're going to leave right now with Stephen and Lucy. It's better this way, Mom. No drama. Tomorrow we'll come see you at the facility to wish you a Merry Christmas. The plan was perfect in their greedy little minds. Drag me out of my house on Christmas Eve under the guise of safety. Lock me up that same night so I couldn't put up a fight, and come back the next day, Christmas Day, to divide the loot. They were going to keep the Crestview estate, the 100 acres of high-altitude crops, the colonial house, the antique furniture, everything my husband and I built with our blood, sweat, and tears. I looked around. The living room was warm, lit by the lights of the tree I had decorated myself with hand-blown glass ornaments that were older than my children. The smell of pine and beeswax mixed with the aroma of the food that was about to go to waste, or worse, that they would devour to celebrate their victory over the stubborn old woman. Any other woman would have started crying. She would have screamed. She would have reminded them of the feverish nights spent sitting by their beds, the college tuitions paid for by the harvests, the loans taken out for their weddings, the whims I indulged. She would have begged for mercy, appealing to the Christmas spirit. But I am Anna, and my name isn't an accident. I've always known how to cure the diseases of this land, whether it's blight in the fields or parasites in the family. All right, I said. The silence that followed my words was absolute. Robert blinked, confused by the lack of resistance. Lucy stopped pawing at a porcelain statuette. What did you say? Stephen asked. I said, all right, you're right, I'm old. My knees ache when the weather turns. And this house has way too many stairs. Maybe it's time to rest. I watched their shoulders drop. They exchanged poorly hidden looks of triumph. That was easier than we thought, their eyes said. They underestimated me. They've always underestimated me. They think that just because I wear a shawl and spend my days in the garden, my brain has dried up like a tobacco leaf. Don't they know that anyone who knows how to manage a harvest knows exactly when to prune the dead branches? I'll go get my coat and my purse, I announced, turning toward the stairs. I'll go with you, Mom, Claire offered, with that fake concern that made my stomach turn. No, my voice cracked like a whip, and she stopped dead in her tracks. I want to say goodbye to my room alone. Give me at least that 1 minute of dignity. I climbed the wooden stairs with a steady step, feeling their eyes drilling into my back. Every step was a memory. This is where Robert fell and chipped a tooth. Over there is where my husband used to sit and read the paper. This house was my skin, my history. I walked into my bedroom and closed the door softly. I didn't turn on the overhead light, just the small lamp on the nightstand. The room felt strange, stripped of its soul, even though it looked perfectly normal at first glance. I walked over to my dresser. I didn't look for photos, or rosaries, or embroidered handkerchiefs. I opened the secret compartment in the back of the drawer, the one my husband taught me how to use 40 years ago. I pulled out the only thing that truly mattered to me in that moment, the heavy ring of wrought iron master keys. They were ancient, heavy keys that opened everything from the main iron gate to the storage barns and the wall safe hidden in the library. I weighed them in my hand. They were cold and hard, just like the decision I had made weeks ago. That was when I accidentally overheard a phone call Robert was having with a real estate agent. "Yeah, the old lady won't last much longer out here. The land alone is worth millions for a boutique hotel," he had said. That day, something in my mother's heart broke forever, and in its place, a military strategist was born. I looked at myself in the full-length mirror. I saw a woman with white hair pulled back into a flawless bun, wearing a gray wool dress, and dark eyes that didn't hold a single tear. I wasn't going to cry. Crying is for people who don't have a plan. I had something way better than tears. I had a notarized deed, sealed and executed 3 days ago. I grabbed my handbag, where I already had my personal documents and my blood pressure medication packed. I didn't need to pack anything else. The suitcases they brought were full of old clothes they had probably raided from my closet during their last visit, just to make the transition easier for me. Before leaving, I ran my hand over the quilt on the king-size bed. It was cold. I had been sleeping alone for years. But tonight, the loneliness felt different. It felt powerful. It was a chosen isolation, not a forced one. I walked downstairs. They were already at the door, anxious, wearing their coats. Robert was checking his expensive watch. "Let's go, Mom. Traffic is going to get heavy." "I'm ready," I said, stepping off the last stair. "You're not taking anything else?" Marcella asked, eyeing my small purse. "A keepsake from Dad," I smiled, a small, almost imperceptible smile. "I'm taking everything that belongs to me," I replied, and it was the greatest truth I had spoken in years. We stepped out into the freezing night. The air smelled like pine and burning firewood. My children pulled the heavy door of the main house shut with a solid thud. Robert locked it with his own set of keys, a set I had given him years ago for emergencies. I watched him slip that key into his pocket with a possessive satisfaction that turned my stomach. "We'll come by early tomorrow to see what the house needs and do some cleaning," Lucy said, climbing into her SUV. "You just rest at the home, Mom. You deserve it." They put me in the back seat of Stephen's car. No one sat in the back with me. They treated me like a fragile package being shipped via freight. As the car crunched down the gravel driveway, pulling away from the estate, I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I knew exactly what the house looked like. Majestic, imposing, silent, the Crestview estate, my entire life. Up in the front seat, my kids were chatting about the price of commodities on the international market and how they were going to remodel the kitchen to make it more modern. They talked like I was deaf or invisible. They were spending money they thought they already had in the bag. That was easier than I thought, Stephen whispered to Robert over the phone, thinking the engine noise drowned him out. The old lady isn't tracking anymore. She didn't even ask about the silver. I closed my eyes and settled into the leather seat. I let them think I was sleeping. I let them think they had won. We arrived at the facility, serene rest, an hour later. It was a clean, sterile building that smelled like bleach and boiled soup. Nothing like the scent of spices and open fields of my home. A tired-looking nurse met me at the entrance. My kids hurriedly signed paperwork without reading the fine print. They gave me quick pecks on the cheek, dry, empty kisses. "Merry Christmas, Mom," Robert said, patting my shoulder. "We'll come by tomorrow. Don't worry about the house. It's in good hands." "I know," I said, clutching my purse to my chest, feeling the heavy iron keys pressing against me. "I know exactly whose hands it's in." I watched them walk away, laughing, freed from their burden. They were going out to celebrate their triumph, to toast with champagne, dreaming of the inheritance they would claim tomorrow. They pictured my house full of treasures, waiting to be divided. They pictured the bank accounts, the property deeds, the jewels in the safe. The nurse guided me to a small room with a twin bed and a window that looked out onto a brick wall. "Do you want me to help you unpack, Ms. Anna?" she asked kindly. "No, sweetheart, that won't be necessary," I replied, sitting on the edge of the bed. "I won't be here very long." "All right, then. Get some rest. Christmas dinner is served in half an hour." When she left, I was finally alone. I pulled an old basic flip phone out of my purse. The kind that only makes calls, the one my kids always mocked for being obsolete. I dialed a number I knew by heart. "Hello." A rough voice answered on the other end. "Arthur, it's Anna. Ma'am, Merry Christmas. Did something happen?" "No, Arthur. Everything went exactly according to plan. I'm at the facility. They just left." "Perfect, boss. The moving trucks finished rolling out an hour ago. The house is exactly as you ordered. And the storage barns are empty, ma'am, down to the very last grain. And the buyer already wired the funds, just like we set up with the lawyer. Thank you, Arthur. Go be with your family. Tomorrow is going to be an interesting day." I hung up. I leaned back against the stiff pillow of the nursing home. For the first time all day, I felt genuine peace. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel scared. I felt the cold, calculating satisfaction of a chess player who just moved her queen for checkmate. And the opponent still hasn't realized the game ended 3 turns ago. My children would go back to the estate tomorrow. They would slide their keys into the lock. They would walk in, expecting to find a lifetime's legacy ready to be plundered. They would be licking their chops, thinking about the antiques and the harvests. But I knew what they were going to find. And that image, the look on their faces when those doors swung open, was the best Christmas present I could have ever given myself. Tomorrow, the real lesson would begin. The Christmas morning light didn't pour in golden and warm like it did in my bedroom at the estate, filtering through the branches and the linen curtains. Here, in room 104 of serene rest, the light was white, cold, and artificial, bleeding through a cheap plastic blind that wouldn't close right. I woke up before any alarm went off. My biological clock, tuned for decades to the roosters and the start of the workday in the fields, doesn't understand forced retirement or holidays. I sat up in the narrow bed on scratchy sheets that smelled like industrial bleach and looked around. A particle board wardrobe, an empty nightstand, a plastic chair. That was all my children thought I deserved after 50 years of breaking my back. I got up and went to the bathroom. The mirror reflected an older woman. Yes, with the wrinkles that life had carved into me. But in my eyes, there wasn't the fog of confusion they so desperately wanted to see. There was a razor-sharp clarity. I washed my face with cold water. There was no oatmeal and honey soap here. Just a dispenser pumping out pink liquid that smelled like cheap bubble gum. Merry Christmas, Anna, I told myself in the mirror. My voice sounded rock solid. I stepped out into the hallway. The silence was dead, interrupted only by a distant cough or the squeak of a janitor's cart. I walked down to the common room. There was a plastic Christmas tree in the corner, with ornaments that looked like they had survived 3 tours of duty, and a TV playing cartoons with the volume turned low. I walked over to the large window overlooking the parking lot. It was empty. My kids would be waking up right about now. Maybe hungover, definitely anxious. They'd be getting ready to head up to Crestview, rubbing their hands together, picturing how they'd split up my life. I went back to my room and locked the door. It was time to check my real inventory. Not the pile of old clothes they packed for me, but the one I carried in my black leather purse. The one I never let go of. I sat in the plastic chair, pulled out my ledger, an old worn Moleskine, and my obsolete cell phone. I turned it on. I had 3 text messages from Arthur, my trusted foreman, my right hand, and probably the only loyal man left in my life since my husband passed. Message 1, Zotuzu a.m. The moving trucks arrived safely at the rented warehouse in the city. All the fine furniture is secured. Message 2, Zo 3:50 a.m. The keys to the barns and the main house were left on the kitchen counter. Just like you asked, there isn't a single grain left. Message 3, 06 a.m. God bless you, boss. Let me know whenever you want me to come pick you up. I sighed, feeling a wave of relief unknot the muscles in my back. Arthur had delivered, but the most important part was still pending. I opened the banking app on my phone. My kids laughed at my old phone. They called it a brick. But they never noticed it was an encrypted model I used for international export transactions. They actually thought I kept my money stuffed under a mattress or in cookie jars. I punched in my passcode. The screen lagged for a second due to the building's terrible reception, and then the balance loaded. I counted the zeros, once, twice, 3 times. There it was. The full payment for this year's early harvest and next year's. The deposit from the auction house for the French furniture, the colonial silver, the recognized oil paintings, and the jewelry I didn't wear daily. And the biggest chunk, the initial payout for leasing the land's farming rights for the next 10 years to a foreign agricultural co-op. The number was obscene. It was enough to buy this entire nursing home, bulldoze it, and build a luxury resort. And I'd still have enough left over to travel the world 3 times. My kids thought they were inheriting a gold mine. What they didn't know was that the mine had already been stripped, and the gold was right here, digitized and secure, under the thumbprint of an old lady they thought was losing her mind. I closed the app and put the phone away. I felt powerful. It wasn't the kind of power that comes from barking orders. It was the quiet, absolute power of having total control of the board while everyone else is walking blindfolded toward a cliff. Miss Anna, a young nurse, looking like she hadn't slept a wink, opened the door without knocking. "It's time for breakfast. Come on, your oatmeal is getting cold." She looked at me with that specific brand of condescension young people, reserved for toddlers and the elderly. She spoke slowly, over-enunciating every syllable. "I'm coming, dear," I replied, hunching my shoulders just a bit and dragging my feet on purpose. I wrapped my gray shawl around me. The nurse nodded, clearly pleased with my docility. "There we go. Very good. Today we have red Jell-O because it's Christmas. Doesn't that sound yummy?" "Yes, so yummy," I repeated, burying an ironic smile. If she only knew I had glazed pork-a-roast for dinner last night, and that I could pay her annual salary with what I had sitting in my purse. I shuffled toward the dining room. As I forced down that tasteless paste they called oatmeal, my mind drifted back to the exact moment I decided to do this. It wasn't a spur-of-the-moment thing. It was the straw that broke the camel's back, sure. But that camel had been carrying a heavy load for years. I remembered Christmas 3 years ago. I had come down with a brutal flu. Borderline pneumonia. I was bedridden, weak. My kids showed up, yes. But they didn't bring chicken soup or medicine or comfort. Robert brought a lawyer so I could sign a power of attorney just in case something happened. Lucy stood in front of my mirror, trying on my fur coats while I coughed my lungs out. Stephen complained that the estate's Wi-Fi was too slow to stream his shows. That was the day I realized that to them, I wasn't a mother. I was a depreciating asset. I was an obstacle standing between them and the money. But the final blow was the conversation I overheard a month ago. They were out on the terrace, assuming I was taking a nap. "The old lady isn't going to make it through another winter," Robert had said, puffing on one of those expensive cigars he buys using my credit cards. "The upkeep on this place is highway robbery. If we sell it off in parcels, we triple our money." "But Mom loves this house," Claire had said, though she didn't sound entirely convinced. "Mom doesn't even know what she loves anymore," Lucy cut in, her voice freezing cold. "Half the time she calls me by Auntie's name. She's losing her mind. We'd be doing her a favor putting her in a home. They'll take care of her there, and we can finally move forward." Move forward. That was the phrase. They wanted to move forward over my dead body, or at least over my forced retirement. It hurt. God knows it hurt, like someone had ripped my arm right out of the socket. I cried that night in the dark, biting down on my pillow so I wouldn't wake the ghosts of the house. But by dawn the pain had hardened into something much more useful. Cold fury. And fury, when mixed with the intellect of a businesswoman, is highly combustible fuel. I decided that if they wanted to move forward, I would pave the road for them. If they thought I was crazy, I'd give them the most lucid insanity they'd ever seen in their lives. If they wanted the house, I'd let them have it, but only the empty shell. "Is the oatmeal good, Grandma?" an old man sitting across from me asked. He had a vacant stare and a food stain on his shirt. "It's delicious," I lied. "Say, do you have any kids?" The man smiled, showing off poorly fitted dentures. "Yeah, 3 real good ones. They haven't come by today. Must be busy. But they always say they're coming tomorrow." I felt a lump form in my throat. Tomorrow, the white lie that keeps people alive in places like this. "Of course they are," I told him, gently touching his wrinkled hand. "I'm sure they'll come tomorrow." But mine weren't coming tomorrow. Mine were heading to the estate today. I glanced at the clock on the dining room wall. It was 10 in the morning. I did the math. They would have left the city by 8. Christmas morning traffic is light. They had to be just about turning onto the dirt road leading up to Crestview. I closed my eyes and pictured the scene. The 3 luxury SUVs kicking up dust on the trail, Robert in the lead, feeling like the boss, the new lord of the valley. Lucy touching up her makeup in the rearview mirror. The twins plotting which bedroom they were going to claim. Stephen running the numbers on how much they could get per acre. They'd pull up to the main gate and find it wide open. How careless of the old lady. Robert would think. The staff has no respect anymore. They would drive into the central courtyard, past the stone fountain that had been singing with water for 100 years. They'd park their cars on the gravel, right on the exact spot where they loaded me up like cattle yesterday. They'd step out with their empty gift boxes, ready to load them up. Robert would pull out that key he pocketed so proudly. He'd slice-eyed into the lock of the carved oak front door. He'd turn it. The door would swing open with a groan of well-oiled hinges, and then the echo. The unmistakable sound of an empty house. There would be no Persian rugs to muffle their footsteps, no mahogany consoles in the foyer, no landscape paintings on the walls. Just the slightly cleaner rectangles of paint where they used to hang. They would run into the empty living room, into the dining room, empty, into the kitchen, deserted. Not a single copper pot, not a ladle, not the half-glazed holiday ham. I ate that myself last night before they arrived and gave the scraps to the foreman's dogs. They would sprint up the stairs, panic starting to claw at their throats. They'd burst into the bedrooms. Unmade beds, bare mattresses or no mattresses at all. Closets standing wide open, totally bare. And finally they would run to the library. Robert would rush to the fake painting on the wall to open the safe. He would find the safe already cracked open. Inside there would be no cash, no jewelry, no property deeds. There would only be an envelope. A cream-colored envelope, heavy cardstock, featuring my flawless, retired schoolteacher turned landowner handwriting. For my children. I smiled in the nursing home dining room, bringing another spoonful of red Jell-O to my mouth. It tasted sweet, almost like vengeance. "You look very happy today, Miss Anna," the nurse said as she walked by collecting trays. "Expecting company?" "No, sweetheart," I replied, dabbing my mouth with a paper napkin. "I'm not expecting anyone. But I have a feeling my phone is going to ring very soon." "Oh, how wonderful." I'm sure it's your kids calling to wish you a Merry Christmas. I'm sure it is, I said. I pulled my cell phone out again and set it on the table next to my plastic water cup. I stared at it. It was just a quiet black object. But at any second it was going to turn into a live grenade. The minutes crawled by. Tick-tock. The wall clock kept moving. 10:15. 10:30. I pictured Lucy screaming. I pictured Stephen punching a wall. I pictured Robert, pale as a ghost, trying to comprehend how a senile old woman had managed to strip a 10,000-square-foot mansion bare in a single night. They didn't know that Arthur and his sons, along with 20 loyal field hands who loved me more than their own blood, had been working since the crack of dawn the day before, hauling everything out the back while I distracted my kids with my supposed fragility. My children forgot a basic rule of country living. Never underestimate the person who grows your food, and never, ever betray the person who knows the back roads of the land. Suddenly, the phone vibrated against the formica table. The buzz made the old man across from me jump. The screen lit up. Caller ID. Robert, eldest son. I let it ring. Once, twice, 3 times. The nurse looked over from across the room. "Ma'am, your phone." "You should answer it. They must be worried." I picked up the device calmly. My hands weren't shaking. My heart was beating at a steady, strong, vibrant rhythm. I swiped to answer, but I didn't say a word. I brought the phone to my ear and waited. I wanted to hear him breathing. I wanted to hear the sound of his defeat. "Mom!" Robert's scream was so loud I had to pull the receiver away from my ear. "Mom, where are you? What the hell is this?" The house is empty. There's nothing here. We've been robbed." "Call the cops right now, Mom. They took everything." I could hear Lucy sobbing in the background, screaming something about her jewelry. I heard Stephen swearing. It was a symphony of pure chaos. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the sterile air of the nursing home, which suddenly felt like the purest air of absolute freedom. "Nobody robbed me of anything, Robert," I said. My voice was so icy I could practically feel frost forming on the phone. "Merry Christmas. I hope you like my gift." "What are you talking about?" he stammered, and I could hear the sheer terror bleeding through his arrogance. "What gift?" "There's nothing here. It's just dust." "Exactly," I replied. "I gifted you the exact same thing you gave me last night. Nothing. And now, my son, I suggest you read the letter I left in the safe before you even think about raising your voice at me again." I hung up. I powered off the phone. I looked up at the nurse, who was staring at me with wide-eyed curiosity. "Is everything okay, Miss Anna?" she asked. That sounded like an intense phone call. I stood up from the chair, standing tall, feeling like I had just shed 10 years in 10 seconds. I adjusted my shawl with elegance, as if it were an ermine stole. "Everything is excellent, miss," I told her, walking toward the dining room exit with a firm stride. I was just putting the trash in its proper place. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to head back to my room. I have a trip to plan." As I walked down the hallway, I knew this was only the beginning. I had detonated the bomb, yes, but now came the shockwave, and I was ready to surf it. Because Anna, the matriarch of Crestview, was back, and this time, she wasn't serving dinner. I hung up the phone and felt the silence flood back into the dining room. But this time it wasn't an empty silence. It was the silence that comes right before a storm. That specific moment out in the fields when the birds stop singing and the wind drops dead right, before the sky rips open with lightning. My fingers drummed on the formica table. 1, 2, 3. The old man with the oatmeal was staring at me, his mouth hanging open, his spoon frozen halfway to his lips. "Bad news, neighbor?" he asked. "On the contrary, Gregory," I replied, getting to my feet. "It's the news I've been waiting years to hear." I walked to my room with a calm that my knees didn't quite feel, but that I forced my spine to project. I closed the door and slid the deadbolt, not out of fear, but out of strategy. I needed 5 minutes. I dug into my purse and pulled out the business card for Attorney Vance, a man who had been a dear friend of my husband's, and who, unlike my children, understood the value of loyalty and the absolute weight of a signature. I dialed his personal cell. He picked up on the second ring, even though it was Christmas Day. "Anna." "They figured it out, Arthur. They just walked into the house." "How did they react?" "Like hyenas who just had their carcass stolen," I said, looking out the window at the parking lot. Robert was screaming like he was being skinned alive. "They're going to come straight here. I give them 40 minutes, assuming they don't kill themselves on the highway. Everything is ironclad, Anna. The notarized affidavit declaring your full mental capacity, dated 3 days ago, signed by 2 independent psychiatric experts. The bills of sale for the furniture and the machinery. The trust. They can't touch you. I know. But they're going to try to scare me. They're going to try to drag me out of here, take me back to the house, and force me to sign whatever they put in front of me. Do not leave that facility, Anna. Are you safe there? It's a public place with plenty of witnesses. If they try to take me by force, it's kidnapping. Don't worry, Arthur. They couldn't move me out of here with a tow truck. This cheap nursing home is my fortress now." I hung up. I sat on the edge of the bed and smoothed out my skirt. I closed my eyes and visualized the chessboard. They were furious little pawns. I was the queen, motionless, waiting for them to make their fatal mistake. The time dragged. I listened to the hum of the heater and the distant Christmas carols playing on the common room TV. Exactly 45 minutes later, I heard the screech of tires skidding into the driveway. I didn't need to look. I knew the sound of my children's arrogance, right down to the way they hit the brakes. Raised voices echoed from the reception area. Lucy's shrill shrieks. Robert's deep barks demanding to see the director. Stephen's threatening tone. "We want to see our mother right now." "Sir, please, it's Christmas. We have residents resting." The nurse's voice was shaking. "I don't give a damn about their rest. Tell me where room 104 is." I smiled. The time had come. I stood up, grabbed my purse, my shield, and opened my bedroom door just as they rounded the corner of the hallway. The visual was worthy of a tragicomic painting. Robert's tie was undone, his face flushed and sweating. Lucy's mascara was smeared like she'd been crying black tears. Stephen was right behind them, fists clenched tight. The twins looked terrified. darting their eyes around like they expected the cops to jump out of the janitor's closet. When they saw me, they stopped dead. I was standing in the doorway, calm, hands folded neatly in front of me. "Mom," Robert panted, chest heaving. He took a step toward me, invading my personal space. "Good morning, children," I said, my voice soft. "Did you get bored of the estate already? I thought you were going to spend the whole day doing inventory." The word inventory hit him like an open-handed slap. Robert turned purple. "What did you do, you crazy old bat?" he roared, dropping any pretense of respect. "The house is empty. There's nothing left. You got robbed." "I bet it was that hick Arthur, wasn't it? You gave him the keys and he cleaned us out." Residents in the neighboring rooms started poking their heads out. An old woman with a walker stared at us, eyes wide as saucers. "Lower your voice." "Robert," I said, keeping my own tone low, which forced him to shut up just to hear me. "You're scaring my neighbors, and I forbid you to speak about Arthur that way. There is more honesty in his fingernail than in your entire body." "Honest!" Lucy shrieked, stomping forward, her stiletto heels clicking sharply against the cheap linoleum. "Mom, they took the furniture. Grandma's silver, the paintings, even the rugs. That stuff is worth a fortune." "Was," I corrected. "It was worth a fortune." Stephen shoved his way past Lucy. "What do you mean, was? Where is the stuff?" "We're calling the cops right now to report a robbery." I laughed. It was a dry, clipped laugh. "Robbery?" I asked, looking them in the eyes, one by one. "How can someone steal something that belongs to them?" Silence dropped over the hallway. Robert narrowed his eyes, his shark-like financial brain finally starting to process the data. "You," he stammered, "you moved the stuff out." "I sold the stuff," I said with crystal clarity. "I sold everything. The furniture, the silver, the art. The farming equipment, the tractors, the flatbed trucks. All of it." "You can't do that," Claire yelled from the back. "That's our inheritance." "Wrong," I said, raising a single finger. "It is my estate. As long as I am breathing, Crestview and everything inside it belongs to me. And as the legal owner, in full possession of my faculties, I decided to liquidate my assets." Robert ran his hands through his hair in desperation. "And the money?" he rasped, his voice thick with greed. "Where is the money? It's millions, Mom." "Millions. You can't just have that in cash. It's in a safe place," I replied, turning my back to walk into my room. I left the door open, inviting them onto my turf, a place where their claws couldn't reach me. They followed me in, suffocating the tiny hospital room with their overwhelming presence and expensive perfumes that reeked of desperation. Robert slammed the door shut. "Listen to me very carefully, Mom," he said, cornering me against the wardrobe. "This is senile dementia. We are going to contest those sales. We'll say you weren't right in the head. You agreed to come to this home yourself because you said you couldn't handle things alone anymore. That proves you're unfit to manage your finances." There it was, the trap I knew they were going to try and spring. I sat down in the room's single chair and crossed my legs. "Have a seat on the bed if you'd like," I offered. "Robert, you are so predictable. If you claim I'm crazy to void the sales, then my signature checking into this facility is also invalid." which means you are holding me here against my will, which is a felony. But if my signature to enter this facility is valid, then my signature to sell my assets is valid too." Robert opened his mouth, then snapped it shut. He realized he was backed into a legal dead end. "Besides," I continued, pulling a folded copy of the notarized affidavit attorney Vance had given me out of my purse. "Mr. Vance came to the estate 3 days ago. He brought 2 doctors. They certified my mental health before I signed a single bill of sale. Here's a copy." I tossed the paper at him. It fluttered down and landed at his feet. Robert snatched it up and read it ravenously, his eyes darting across the legal jargon. All the color drained from his face. This is ironclad," he whispered. "You planned this. You planned the whole thing. Ever since the day I heard you say you wanted to sell my house to build a hotel," I confirmed. "Did you think I wouldn't find out? Did you think I was deaf?" Lucy collapsed onto the bed, sobbing. "But Mom, the money. We have debts. Robert owes the bank. Stephen blew it all on bad investments. We were counting on that." "I know," I said, completely devoid of pity. "I know you're broke. I know you've been living way beyond your means, waiting for me to die so you could plug up your holes. But I have news for you. I'm going to live a very long time, and I'm going to live well." "Let's go," Stephen said suddenly, grabbing me by the arm. "We're going back to the house. We're going to fix this there. You have to tell us where the money is or who you gave it to. You can't stay here." I ripped my arm out of his grip with a violent jerk that caught him off guard. "Do not touch me," I barked, projecting an authority I hadn't used since they were toddlers. "I am not going anywhere. You brought me here. You paid the first month in advance. You said this was the best place for me. Well, you were right. I'm safe here. I have nurses here. Here, I don't have to look at your disappointed faces every single morning I wake up alive." "Mom, please," Marcella begged, trying the pity angle. "It's Christmas. Don't do this to us." "I didn't do anything to you," I replied, softening my tone slightly. But only so the final blow would hurt that much more. I just secured my retirement. You guys wanted the house, right? The house is right there. The walls, the roof, the dirt. It's yours. Enjoy it. But the soul of that house, your father's sweat, the value of 50 years of hard work, I took that with me." Robert crushed the notarized paper in his fist. He glared at me with pure, unfiltered hatred. He wasn't looking at his mother anymore. He was looking at a business partner who had just swindled him. "You won't see a single cent from us." He threatened, "You're going to rot in this dump." "Son," I smiled, and it was a genuine smile. "I have enough money in my account to buy this dump and turn it into a spa if I feel like it. I don't need your pennies. I never did. You were the ones who needed mine." There was a long, heavy silence. They realized they hadn't just lost the money. They had lost all control. For years, the power dynamic in this family had rested on their youth and my supposed decay now. The scales had violently tipped. I had the capital. I had my wits. And most importantly, I had absolutely nothing left to lose. "Let's go," Robert finally said, dropping the crumpled paper on the floor. "There's nothing left to do here. We're going to talk to the lawyers. This isn't over." "Be my guest," I said. "Attorney Vance is waiting for your call. But I should warn you, he bills by the hour, and he's expensive. And I highly doubt you have the cash to put him on retainer right now." They shuffled out of the room like a pack of beaten dogs, shoving past each other, arguing in hushed tones, pointing fingers. "I told you we should have declared her legally incompetent earlier." Stephen hissed at Robert. "Shut up, you idiot," Robert snapped back. I stood in the middle of the room until their voices faded down the hall, and I heard the engines of their SUVs roaring to life outside. They were leaving, heading back to an empty, freezing house. No food, no furniture, no promise of wealth. I walked over to the window and lifted the plastic blind. I watched the 3 vehicles tear out of the parking lot, kicking up gravel. I let out a long sigh, feeling the adrenaline crash, leaving a deep, bone-weary exhaustion in its wake. I sat on the bed and picked up the crumpled paper Robert had thrown. I carefully smoothed it out over my knees. It was my shield, my declaration of independence. But the game wasn't over. This was just the opening gambit. Now came the counterattack. They would try to sue. They would try to smear my name. They would try every legal and illegal trick in the book to freeze my accounts. They didn't know the money wasn't even in the country anymore. They didn't know my next move wasn't defensive. It was constructive. I looked at my phone. I had a new message. It wasn't from Arthur. It was from an unknown number with an international area code. "Dear Miss Anna, the wire transfer to the foundation has cleared. We are ready to break ground on the orphanage project the moment you give the word." A single tear rolled down my cheek, not from sadness, but from overwhelming emotion. My kids wanted an inheritance. Fine. There would be an inheritance. But it wouldn't go to pay off their gambling debts or fund their shallow luxuries. It would go to children who, unlike them, actually knew the value of a roof over their heads and a hot meal on their plate. I wiped my face and stepped back out into the hallway. The young nurse was watching me from the desk with a worried look. "Is everything okay, Ms. Anna? Your children seemed very upset." "They're fine." "Sweetheart," I said, walking toward her. "They just came by to get their Christmas lesson. By the way, what time is lunch? I've suddenly worked up quite an appetite." The nurse smiled, relieved. "In half an hour. We're having turkey today, though it's probably not like the one you make at home." "It doesn't matter," I said. "Today, absolutely anything will taste like heaven." As I walked out into the courtyard to catch some sun before lunch, I knew the war was going to be long. My kids would come back with lawyers, with lies, with emotional manipulation. But I had something they didn't: patience, resources, and for the first time in my life, a purpose that was entirely my own. I sat on a wooden bench beneath a bare tree. The cold wind whipped at my face, but I felt warm inside. I pulled out my ledger and crossed out the line that read, "Phase 1, the reveal." Right beneath it, written in my steady handwriting, was the next step. Phase 2, the sewing. My children thought they had buried me in this nursing home. They didn't know I was a seed. 3 days passed since that Christmas my children will forever remember as Judgment Day. 3 days where my phone didn't stop ringing, buzzing against the nightstand like a dying insect. I didn't answer a single call. I let the silence do its job. I let the anxiety ferment their intentions, the way you ferment fruit for liquor. Today, however, the tone shifted. They didn't come alone. I was out in the small garden of the facility, sitting on an iron bench under the shade of an oak tree, stripped bare by winter, knitting a scarf I didn't need, just to keep my fingers nimble. I saw them walk up from the main entrance. This time, they didn't pull up in luxury SUVs. They arrived in a single car, Robert's company sedan, and they were flanked by a short, balding man carrying a synthetic leather briefcase, who screamed second-rate lawyer from a mile away. Robert led the pack, but he no longer carried himself like the firstborn master of the universe. He had dark bags under his eyes, a wrinkled shirt, and a nervous twitch in his hands that reminded me of the time he broke my favorite vase when he was 7. Lucy and Stephen trailed behind him, heads down, staring at the pavement like they were looking for loose change. The twins didn't show. I figured shame or fear kept them at home. "There she is," Robert pointed, and the lawyer nodded, wiping the sweat from his forehead with a dirty handkerchief. I sat perfectly still, counting my stitches. 1, 2, knit, purl, Mother, Robert said when he reached me. His voice was hoarse, broken. "We need to talk. It's not a request anymore." I looked up slowly, adjusting the reading glasses hanging from a gold chain around my neck. "Good morning, counselor." I greeted the stranger, completely ignoring my son. "I'm Anna. I assume you're here to collect a debt, because my children have a terrible habit of owing money to absolutely everyone." The lawyer cleared his throat, looking uncomfortable. "Mrs. Anna, I am Mr. Gamble. Your children have retained my services to mediate this distressing family and legal situation." Distressing. I let out a short chuckle. "I'm doing wonderfully, Mr. Gamble. I have a roof, food, and nurses. The only ones who seem to be distressed are them." Robert took a step forward, losing his temper. "Drop the act, Mom." We went to the bank. We tried to freeze the estate accounts, citing suspicious activity. And you know what they told us, that there are no accounts, that you closed all of them. "Of course I closed them," I replied calmly, resting my knitting needles in my lap. What kind of manager leaves accounts open for a property she no longer owns? "The money," Stephen interjected, his eyes bloodshot. "It's millions of dollars, Mom. That money can't just disappear. The branch manager told us wire transfers were made overseas. That's capital flight. You could go to jail." I looked at Stephen with profound pity. He was always the impulsive one, the one who never learned to read life's fine print. "Son, that money is mine. It was earned with my sweat, from the dirt I worked while you all slept in until noon. I can burn it in a bonfire if I feel like it." "No, you cannot," Mr. Gamble interrupted, popping open his briefcase and pulling out a stack of papers. "Ma'am, I hold here a petition for precautionary conservatorship. Your children allege that you are squandering the family estate due to mental instability brought on by your age. If you do not tell us where the money is and sign this power of attorney granting your son Robert control over the remaining assets, we will file this before a judge tomorrow morning. They will declare you incompetent, ma'am, and then the money will revert back to them anyway." but you will spend your final days locked in a state psychiatric ward, not this private facility. The threat hung in the freezing morning air. It was a dirty, vile play, the lowest card a child could ever play against their mother. I looked at Lucy. She looked away, unable to meet my eyes. She knew this was wrong, but her greed was stronger than her conscience. "Is that what you want?" I asked, my voice dropping to a dangerous register. "To lock me in a madhouse so you can rob me?" "It's for your own good, Mom," Robert said, repeating his favorite mantra, though this time his chin was trembling. "You don't know what you're doing. You're throwing our future away." I took a deep breath. I stood up from the bench, leaning on my wooden cane. Not because I needed it, but because it gave me authority. "All right," I said. "If we're going to talk about laws and reality, let's lay it all out. Sit down." No one moved. I said, "Sit down," I barked, using the exact tone I used to command the field workers during harvest season. They obeyed instantly, dropping onto the bench across from me like scolded school children. The lawyer remained standing, looking unsure. I reached into my knitting bag. I didn't pull out yarn. I pulled out a blue plastic folder. "Mr. Gamble," I said, flipping the folder open, "before you file that petition for conservatorship, you might want to look at this." I handed him a document. He took it hesitantly. "What is this?" "It's a solvency report," I explained, staring dead at Robert. "Moral and financial solvency. You see, Mr. Gamble, my children claim I'm squandering the estate. But right here, I have proof that Robert owes $150,000 to some very shady loan sharks to cover his underground poker and sports betting debts." Robert turned pale as wax. "What?" he stammered. "I have friends everywhere." "Son, Arthur has a cousin who works collections for those people. I know they gave you until the end of the year to pay up. That means you have 4 days left. That's why you were in such a rush, isn't it? That's why you locked me up on Christmas Eve. It wasn't for my safety. It was for your kneecaps. What are they going to break first if you don't pay?" Mr. Gamble looked at Robert in shock. Robert swallowed hard, speechless. "And Lucy," I continued, pulling out another sheet of paper. "My darling daughter, the socialite. You have 3 mortgages on your house. You forged your husband's signature on the last one. If he finds out, he'll divorce you and leave you on the street. You needed your cut of the inheritance to plug the hole before his company's annual audit." Lucy burst into tears, burying her manicured face in her hands. "Mom, please!" "And you, Stephen," I said, pointing at the youngest. "You're just useless. You blew everything on crypto scams. You owe the shirt off your back." I snapped the folder shut with a loud crack. "So, Mr. Gamble, if you go before a judge and say I'm crazy, I will go before that exact same judge and prove that my children are desperate debtors trying to extort their elderly mother to pay for their vices. And I have the notarized affidavit of my flawless mental health, signed by 2 forensic psychiatrists 3 days ago. Who do you think is going to win?" Mr. Gamble slowly snapped his briefcase shut. He took a step back, distancing himself from my kids like they had a contagious disease. "Mr. Robert, you didn't mention anything about gambling debts or prior psychiatric evaluations." "It's a lie," Robert screamed. but his voice was a thin wire of panic. "She's lying." "I never lie about money, Robert. You know that better than anyone," I said. And for the first time, I felt a sharp pang in my chest. Not for myself, but seeing what the babe I nursed had turned into. They were empty shells, filled with nothing but fear and greed. "Mom." Robert dropped to his knees on the dead grass. The lawyer, the threats, his dignity, it was all gone. There was only a terrified man left. "Mom, please, they're going to kill me. If I don't pay, they're going to kill me. You have the money. We know you do. Help us, I'm begging you. We'll get you out of here right now. We'll take you back to the estate. We'll treat you like a queen. Just please pay off the debt." Lucy joined him, grabbing the hem of my skirt. "Mom, I'm going to lose my house. My kids, your grandkids, are going to be out on the street." I looked down at them. They were pathetic. They were my children, my own blood, and they were begging me to save them from the fires they had started themselves, using the very firewood they had tried to steal from me. "Get up," I said coldly. "Have a little self-respect. We're in a public place." They scrambled to their feet, sniffling, looking at me with that blind hope children have when they think mommy can fix everything. "You're right about one thing," I said, smoothing out my shawl. "I have the money, the sale of the estate, the machinery, the future harvests, and the antiques. It all added up to a number none of you could even count without getting lost." Their eyes lit up. They saw salvation. They saw a blank check. "But there's one small detail," I continued, and I watched their smiles falter. "That money no longer exists as cash." "What?" Stephen asked. "Did you hide it? Did you bury it?" "No, I planted it." I pulled out my cell phone and opened an email I had received that very morning. I showed it to the lawyer, knowing my kids wouldn't understand the legal jargon. "Read the header out loud, Mr. Gamble, please." The lawyer adjusted his glasses and read, "Formation of Irrevocable Trust. The Anna Foundation for Rural Development and Child Welfare. International Bank of Zurich." My kids froze. The word irrevocable hung in the air between us like a death sentence. What does that mean?" Lucy asked, her voice trembling. "It means, ma'am," the lawyer explained, a hint of professional awe in his voice, "that your mother no longer owns the money. The capital belongs to a legal entity, a foundation. And because it's an irrevocable trust, it cannot be undone. Not by her, not by you, and not by a judge. The funds are untouchable, ironclad." "Exactly," I said, putting my phone away. "Every single dime I made from selling Crestview was wired to that foundation yesterday. Its purpose is to build rural schools, orphanages, and provide scholarships for the children of field workers who want to study agriculture." "No," Robert screamed, grabbing his head. "You couldn't have done that. That's our money. That's our inheritance." "It was my money," I corrected sharply, "and now it's the money of hundreds of kids who aren't to blame for your mistakes. You had every opportunity in the world. You had the best private schools, the best doctors, vacations, cars, paid weddings, and you squandered all of it. You turned it all into debt and cheap appearances." I stepped closer to Robert, who was crying openly now, the ugly, loud sobbing of a broken man. "You wanted an inheritance, right? Well, I left you the best inheritance possible, the necessity to work. You ruined us, Lucy shrieked. You're a monster. No mother does this. A mother who actually loves her children doesn't let them be parasites until they're 50, I shot back. I've been an accomplice to your uselessness for way too long. I covered up your mistakes. I funded your tantrums. And look at the result. 3 vultures waiting for their mother to die so they can pick her bones clean. Well, it's over. The tap is shut off. The well is dry. Stephen punched the trunk of the oak tree over and over until his knuckles bled. So what are we supposed to do? He yelled, staring at his bleeding hand. What the hell are we supposed to do? Work, I said simply. Sell your luxury cars. Sell the houses you can't afford. Move into small apartments. Learn how to cook. Learn how to take the bus. Learn what $1 is actually worth. Mr. Gamble closed his briefcase. Mrs. Anna, I believe my presence here is no longer required. The document you showed me is definitive. No judge on earth is going to touch an international charitable trust. If your children want to fight this, they'll need years of litigation and millions of dollars in legal fees, which they clearly do not have. Thank you, Mr. Gamble, I said. You're free to go, and I highly suggest you collect your fee up front. The man gave me a slight nod of respect. He ignored my children and walked quickly back to his car. He knew when a ship was sinking. I was left alone with them. The silence was heavy, loaded with resentment and raw terror. Are you really going to let us drown? Robert asked, looking at me with beaten dog eyes. You're going to let them break my legs? I looked him in the eyes. The exact same eyes I saw open for the first time 48 years ago. My soul ached. Every maternal fiber in my body screamed in pain. I wanted to pull out my checkbook. I wanted to save him. I wanted to hug him and tell him everything was going to be all right. But I knew that if I did, I would doom him forever. If I saved him now, he would never stop being a dependent child. I am not going to give you money, Robert, I said, and my voice didn't waver. But I will give you a piece of advice that's worth far more. Arthur needs field hands for the harvest up at his brother's farm up north. It's brutal work, sunup to sundown. The pay is garbage, but they provide room and board. And loan sharks don't usually go looking for people in the mud of an orchard. If you want to disappear for a while and put in an honest day's work, I can make a call. Robert stared at me in disbelief. You're offering me a job as a field hand. I'm offering you an honest way to survive and hide. Take it or leave it. Robert dropped his head. He knew he had no choice. His pride was dead. All that was left was the instinct to survive. Call him, he whispered. I looked at Lucy and Stephen. I don't have any job offers for you two, but I do have a warning. If you ever set foot in this facility again to scream at me or demand a single dime, I will call the police, and I will hand them the blue folder. Do we understand each other? They nodded, defeated, destroyed. Now leave, I said, sitting back down on my bench and picking up my knitting needles. It's time for my occupational therapy, and I don't want to be late. I watched them drag themselves back to Robert's car. They walked hunched over, like they were carrying the weight of the world on their shoulders. And in a way, they were. They were carrying the weight of reality, the reality I had shielded them from for decades. When the car started and disappeared through the gates, I finally let out the breath I had been holding. My hands started to shake slightly. It wasn't easy. God knows it wasn't easy watching my kids suffer. But sometimes the most painful surgery is the only one that saves the patient's life. Miss Anna? The nurse's voice pulled me out of my thoughts. She was holding a tray with a glass of orange juice. Is everything okay? That looked like an intense meeting. I took the glass with gratitude. Everything is excellent, sweetheart. I was just pruning the dead branches so the tree can grow again. Oh, that's good. Hey, you have a phone call at the front desk. It's international. They said it's from the foundation. I smiled. The sadness evaporated, instantly replaced by the adrenaline of the future. I'll be right there, I said, standing up with renewed energy. My kids thought my life had ended in this nursing home. They didn't know I was just starting my second youth. I walked toward the main building, leaving behind the garden, the bench, and the image of my defeated children. I wasn't looking at the past anymore. My eyes were locked on the blueprints of a school that would soon be built on red dirt, far, far away from here. But before I left, I had to do one last thing, one final masterstroke to ensure the lesson was branded into their memories forever. I stopped at the glass entrance doors and looked at my reflection. Get ready, Anna, I told myself, because now comes the fun part. Tomorrow, I wouldn't be here for breakfast. Tomorrow my bed would be empty, just like the estate house. And when they came back, because I knew they would try to manipulate me again, they would only find a note and a used boarding pass. The real transformation was about to begin. The air smells different out here. It doesn't smell like confinement or bleach or that artificial lavender they use in nursing homes to mask the scent of old age. Out here in the Appalachian foothills, the air smells like wet earth, fresh pine, and hope. It's been 6 months since I checked out of my room at serene rest. And even though my knees still complain when the humidity spikes, my spirit runs like a 20-year-old girl. I'm standing on the porch of my new house. It's not a mansion like Crestview. It's a simple, single-story timber frame cabin with wide wraparound porches that catch the cross breeze. There's no French furniture or family silver to polish. Just wicker chairs woven by local craftsmen, sturdy wooden tables built for hard work, and shelves lined with books and accounting ledgers. From here, I can see the valley. I don't see my old 100 acres. I see 200. But these aren't mine to get rich off of. They are the beating heart of the New Seed Cooperative, the project born from the sale of my past life. Down below, in the clearing, I can see the crew putting the roof on the new elementary school. I can hear the shouts of kids playing soccer with a plastic ball. Kids who used to walk 3 miles just to learn how to read, and who will now have classrooms 10 minutes from their front doors. I adjust my straw hat. I don't wear tailored suits or fine wool coats anymore. I wear denim jeans, a white cotton shirt, and my work boots. The locals don't call me Miss Anna out of fear, the way the old field hands used to. They call me teacher. And that title is worth more than any bank account. My children thought they were sending me away to die while still breathing, to sit in front of a TV and wait for the end. They didn't know they were giving me the final push I needed to fulfill the dream my husband and I had when we were young, before money and comfort distracted us, to give back to the dirt what the dirt gave to us. My phone rings. It's a new, smart model I had to buy to handle video calls with the Swiss investors. But it's not a banker calling. It's Arthur. "Good morning, boss." His loyal voice comes through the speaker. "Good morning, Arthur. How are things up north?" "Good, teacher. The harvest is moving along. But I'm calling to give you the monthly report on the scholarship kids." I smile as I sink into my rocking chair. The scholarship kids are my children. That was the condition I set through Attorney Vance when they came crawling back, begging for help 4 months ago, when the water was finally over their heads. I didn't give them money. I gave them opportunities, but starting from the absolute bottom. "Tell me," I say, taking a sip of black coffee from my own yield. "Well, look." Robert cried a lot at first. His hands were covered in blisters the first week. He complained about the sun, the food, the bugs. But yesterday, I saw him hauling 2 heavy sacks over his shoulder without making a peep. He doesn't have that boss's gut anymore. He's skinny, sunburned to a crisp. But he looks more like a real man, if you don't mind me saying. He's already paid off half his debt with the sweat of his brow, and the allowance you set up from the emergency fund for his creditors, conditioned on his hours. I close my eyes and picture my firstborn, the one who thought he owned the world, bending his back under the blazing sun. It hurts. Of course it hurts. But it's the necessary pain of setting a broken bone. "And the others?" I ask, "Miss." "Lucy is working the register at my cousin's grocery store back in the city. My cousin says she treated the customers like garbage at first, walking around with her nose in the air. But after she got fired from 2 other jobs for having an attitude, it seems like she finally got the message. Now she greets people, rings them up right, and even helps mop the floors at closing. She sold her jewelry. Boss. Paid off one of the mortgages with it. Now she's living in a rent-controlled apartment with the twins. And the girls? I ask about my granddaughters. They're going to public school. They say they don't have the newest iPhones anymore, but they're getting straight A's. Seems like the lack of luxury woke up their brains. And Stephen? Arthur pauses. He's the toughest case, teacher, still stubborn. He tried to sell some land that didn't belong to him and almost caught a fraud charge. But when he realized nobody was coming to bail him out of jail, he started driving for a ride-share app. Says it's humiliating, but at least he's putting food in his mouth. I sigh. Not all trees bear fruit at the same time. Some take longer. Thank you, Arthur. Keep an eye on them. Make sure they have a roof and food, but not a single penny for luxuries. If they get sick, pay for the doctor. If they're hungry, feed them. But if they ask for a loan, tell them Anna's bank is closed forever. Understood, boss. By the way, Robert asked about you. Oh, what did he say? He asked if he could come see you someday, not to ask for anything, just to see you. A lump forms in my throat. For the first time in years, Robert wants to see his mother, not his ATM. Tell him that when his hands have as many calluses as mine, and when his debt is paid down to the very last cent, then he can come have a cup of coffee with me, not one day sooner. We hang up. I stare at the phone for a moment. Toughness is a form of love that very few people understand. But it's the only kind that saves a life when kindness has turned into poison. My children were rotting from how easy they had it. I had to be the scalpel that cut out the infection, even if it made my own heart bleed to do it. I stand up and walk toward the school. Today is a big day. Today we're opening the community kitchen, walking down the dirt path. I cross paths with Joanne, a woman my age who has lived in this valley her entire life. She doesn't have millions in the bank, but she has a wisdom that I am only just now recovering. Teacher, she waves at me. The big pot's just arrived. We're making stew for everyone today. I'm coming, Joanne. Save me a spot to chop onions, I yell back. I too get the sight. The noise is beautiful. There is life here. There is purpose. A group of kids runs toward me. Among them is Mikey, an 8-year-old who lost his parents in a car wreck 2 years ago. He hugs my legs with enough force to almost knock me over. Grandma Anna, he yells. Look at my new shoes. I bend down with some difficulty, but gladly to look at his little work boots, miniature replicas of my own. I bought them for him with my first paycheck as director of the foundation. They're gorgeous, buddy. Now you can hike the trail safely. Mikey looks up at me with those bright, dark eyes. When I grow up, I'm going to be the boss of all this, just like you. And I'm going to take care of the old folks. I'm not going to lock them up. The innocence of his words pierces right through me. He doesn't know my whole story, but kids have a way of sensing hidden truths. I ruffle his messy hair. I hope so, sweetheart. I hope so. I walk into the kitchen. The smell of spices, roasted peppers, and hot cocoa wraps around me. It's the exact same smell my kitchen at Crestview used to have. But here, nothing goes to waste. Here, every plate of food is a victory against hunger. I tie on my apron. I'm not the owner supervising from afar. I'm just another link in the chain. I peel potatoes. I stir the rice pot. I pour iced tea. As I work, I think about loneliness, the loneliness my kids condemned me to that Christmas Eve. They thought loneliness was being away from your family. They were wrong. True loneliness is being surrounded by people who only love you for what you can give them. Here, surrounded by strangers who don't share a drop of my blood, I feel more accompanied than I have in all the Christmases of the last decade. At noon, we take a break. The dining hall is packed. I see mothers feeding their kids. I see the town elders sharing tables with the construction crew. I sit in a corner with my bowl of stew. I pull my phone out and look at the picture. Arthur texted me. It's a blurry photo taken from a distance. It shows Robert sitting on a rock, eating a plate of beans, staring blankly at the horizon. He looks tired, dirty, old, but he looks real. I'm sorry. Son, I think. I'm sorry I didn't teach you this sooner. I'm sorry I gave you everything except what actually mattered. But it's never too late to learn how to be human. Suddenly, a hand rests on my shoulder. It's Attorney Vance, who drove up from the city for the grand opening and to bring me some paperwork. Anna, he says, sitting down next to me. You have visitors. My heart skips a beat. Robert? Lucy? Who? I ask, tensing up. It's not your kids, he clarifies quickly, noticing my panic. It's a delegation of female entrepreneurs. They heard about what you did, how you transformed a stagnant estate into an engine for development. They want to meet you. They want to replicate your model in other states. They say you're an inspiration. I laugh, a loud, genuine laugh that rattles my chest. And inspiration. I'm just a stubborn old woman who refused to be thrown away. Sometimes, that's all it takes to change the world, replies. By the way, they dropped this off for you at my office this morning. He hands me a small, crumpled envelope with childlike handwriting. No, it's not childlike. It's the handwriting of someone who is learning how to write all over again. Or someone writing with badly blistered hands. I open the envelope. It's a page ripped out of a spiral notebook. Mom, I don't know if you'll read this. Arthur told me you're doing well. I just wanted to tell you that the harvest tastes different when you're the one picking it. I never knew how heavy a sack actually was. I never knew how much $1 actually cost. I hated you so much that Christmas. I hated you when you sold the house. But last night, sleeping on the cot in the bunkhouse, I dreamt about Dad, and he wasn't looking at me with disappointment, the way I always imagined. He was smiling. I'm not asking for money. I'm just asking you not to die yet. Hold on a little longer. When we see each other again, I don't want you to look at the parasite you raised. I want you to look at the man I am trying to be. Thank you for the lesson, even though it hurts like hell. Robert. A tear hits the paper, smudging the cheap ink. It's the first tear I've shed since this whole madness started. But it's not out of sadness. It's relief. The surgery worked. The patient is responding. I fold the letter and tuck it in my shirt pocket, right over my heart. I stand up from the table. The entrepreneurs are waiting for me. The kids are waiting for me. The harvest is waiting. I am 75 years old, and I feel like my life is just starting the first chapter. I step out into the midday sun. The valley glows a brilliant, vibrant green. My children thought they were taking my home. They thought they were taking my dignity. They thought that by locking me away, they were putting out my light. Poor fools. They didn't know that women like us, the ones who have birthed and raised and buried, the ones who have loved and lost, we don't burn out. We just reinvent ourselves. I am not an abandoned old woman in a nursing home. I am Anna. I am dirt. I am the seed. And I am the hand that cultivates. And as long as I have the strength to stand up, I will keep planting. Because the greatest revenge isn't destroying your enemy. It's blooming so high and so strong that your shadow provides them shelter when they finally realize that you can't eat money. I look to the north, toward where my children are finally learning how to live, and I send them a silent blessing. Learn well, kids, I whisper to the wind, because someday all of this will be yours. But this time, it won't be a gift. It will be a prize. I turn around and walk toward the fields, where the future is already sprouting, bright and red, under the sun of my new life. This narrative is a profound reminder that human connection and integrity are far more valuable than material possessions. The story of Anna, a 74-year-old woman betrayed by her own children, serves as a powerful exploration of resilience and the courage to break cycles of toxic dependency. While Anna's children viewed her as a fading asset, to be liquidated for their own financial gain. She demonstrated the sharpness of a survivor, teaching them that true value is earned through labor and responsibility, rather than inherited. Her decision to strip the estate and transform her wealth into an educational foundation for rural development highlights the shift from ego-driven gain to legacy-driven impact. Ultimately, the story teaches us that we cannot protect those we love by shielding them from the consequences of their own actions. Instead, by refusing to be a crutch, Anna allowed her children the difficult, painful opportunity to find their own character. This is a call to action for everyone to value the people in their lives, foster independence, and ensure that our legacies are built on kindness and utility to the world rather than just gold. Disclaimer: the stories and analysis provided above are intended solely for educational and storytelling purposes. The characters and situations are fictional. Any resemblance to real persons or events is purely coincidental.